Welcome back to another episode of the CHL Top 10 Show. As always, my name is Scott Van Coonet, and today I welcome back the man that's seemingly everywhere. That's TSN's Director of Scouting, Craig Button. We'll talk about what makes a good junior hockey team, which teams could potentially join the Saginaw Spirit at the 104th Memorial Cup presented by Dow, Connor Bedard's impressive start in the NHL, and who might be the CHL's next superstar. Here's Craig Button. Always excited to have my next guest join me, and that's TSN's Director of Scouting, Craig Button. Craig, thanks for joining me today. You know, we're about a month into the CHL season. The NHL's in full swing now as well. The days are getting cooler and shorter. The leaves are changing. Is there a better time of year?
No, there isn't. I mean, we think about the fall and the leaves changing, and I love the seasons changing and the colors. You know, I'm driving and you see all the magnificent colors as the leaves change. But it's also a signal that there's a new season upon us, not just autumn falling upon us, but the hockey season. And, you know, you got the young players in junior playing, and, they're excited and they're underway, and then the NHL is underway. And just think of, and I'm watching opening night on Tuesday in the NHL. Just think about all the players that played with Connor Bedard, whether it be on the junior team in Regina, all the players that played against him. I would have to think that all eyes were fixed on Connor Bedard's debut in Pittsburgh versus Crosby. And I remember Crosby's first game, and that was 18 years ago. I think Connor was 85 days old when Sidney Crosby played his first NHL game. So you think about, the span of time, and you think about, the changing seasons. Sidney Crosby is still a superstar in the National Hockey League, and certainly Connor Bedard is going to be a superstar in the National Hockey League. It's just really neat to see that kind of the meeting of a current great and certainly somebody that I have no doubts will be a great in the not too distant future.
Was there a cooler shot, or could there have been a cooler shot than seeing Crosby face off against Bedard in that opening face off there?
No, I don't think so. And we've seen some interviews with Sidney and Connor talking, and we've heard Connor talk about how Sidney was his idol. And interestingly enough, some of the things that Connor was talking about, how he watched how Sidney talked, how he carried himself, how he presented himself. And he said, I always wanted to be like that. Everybody wants to be a top player, and you try to look at your idols and try to emulate them. And very few players can emulate the greats because their skills are so tremendous. But, to hear Connor talk about Sidney, and Sidney has been all of that and more. And, to hear Kelly Sutherland, the referee, saying to Sidney and welcoming Connor to the game. But when that puck dropped, there was no niceties from Sidney Crosby. If there was ever such a thing as a clean opening face-off win, Sidney showed Connor, hey, you know what? It's time to play.
I was having I had a beer league game last night, and I was having conversations with guys in the room, and they were talking about Connor Bedard and being able to watch him. And for me, it's exciting because, we've gotten to know Connor over the last couple of seasons in the WHL and even watching him before that. And now for everybody else to recognize, not only the talent that he is on the ice, but even we've seen in some of his interviews, the personality that you get out of him off the ice as well. So I think that's kind of cool that everybody is kind of getting to see that now as well.
Yeah, well, you're right, because we get that up front and up close look at Connor, and we've watched him from 15 to 18 through that whole progression, that whole as he's maturing. And I sit and I watch him, and sometimes I'm just amazed. I look and I go, you're 18 years old and you're mature far beyond your years, and that's not common. And you think about somebody that's been in the spotlight for as long as he has been, and he handles it with great comfort. And he's only going to get that much more comfortable as he spends more time doing it. But he's just a great spokesperson for the sport, He will be for his team and in time, and certainly for himself. And he's just wonderful when you think about how lucky we've been. And I said this last year, and I said it the year before. I said, get out and watch Connor Bedard. It's going to cost you $25-$30 for a ticket to a Western Hockey League game. Go and spend it, because once he turns pro, and that'll happen the minute he's drafted, it's going to cost you a lot more to go watch him play. So get to go and enjoy him. We've had the pleasure of watching him in rinks across Canada at the World Junior Tournament. Obviously, he played in 2 World Junior tournaments in Canada, excelled at both of them. So to be able to now, and you're right, when you see everybody else kind of going, wow, look at how good he is and how impressive he is, and we're going, that's him. Don't be surprised, and I don't think anybody's surprised. I think it becomes something like he leaves you kind of awestruck, not only in his play, but the way he carries himself. And at 18 years of age, he doesn't even look 18. But here he is, command. He's got a presence, and that presence is really significant.
Now, I've had people, all summer long since he was drafted, messaging me and asking what I think he would be able to put up for points, and even, I've got 2 boys that are big Connor Bedard fans, and my oldest, he predicted 150 points, and I said that might be a little bit extreme. But what do you think are reasonable expectations for Connor this year?
So I'll answer that question, and I just want to talk about your 2 boys, and their age and how the whole progression of this happened. I think that, you think back to him coming into the Western Hockey League. It wasn't a good team in Regina, and but he went there. He had the benefit. He didn't really get up and running until they went into the bubble in the spring of 2021. But he excelled. Then he went to the U18 and was an outstanding player. So you saw that very early on, right? And then all he did was dominate everywhere he was thereafter. So there's not been a level where he hasn't been able to quickly learn and then quickly dominate. The NHL, we know what it is. We know how good it is. And there's going to be people that are going to go, okay, show me. I get it. It's the NHL. But Connor doesn't doubt his abilities. He's got a tremendous underlying, quiet, determined confidence. I see him as in the 30-goal range, and whether that's 28 or 32 or 35, and I see him around the 70-point mark. A point a game in the National Hockey League is really, really hard to do. And I think last year, 70 points, I think there were 66 players that had 70 points or more in the National Hockey League. Well, that's not a lot of players. That's 10% of the players. So does Connor Bedard have that capability? Yeah, he does. So for me to put him into the top 10% of point producers in the National Hockey League, I think I don't think it's lofty. I think it's realistic, because I've watched how good he's been, and I've watched how good he's been against older competition. Yes, it's better. Yes, they're older. Yes, they're more experienced. But as John Paddock told me in the spring of 2022, and I've used this often. He said he's been in the spotlight since he was 12 years old, and there's been no spotlight too bright for this young man to shine.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to talk to you about your boys. Your boys, I believe, are 6 and 9. Is that correct? 6 and 9?
Yeah, that's right.
So I always have to do quick math in my head, because you talk about comparable players. So that means you got boys that were born in like 2014 and 2017, right? So now think, like, your 6-year-old is always starting to really kind of glob on, right? So you got to be really current. And even I find, like, 2005 is when Connor was born, and that's really when the rules, after the lockout, new rules. And what I call him is, I call him the lock, like a 05 baby, not just because of his birth year, but because of the way the game changed. And the game that's being played now is the only game Connor Bedard knows, the only game that those players all know. Your sons are going to grow up watching that, and if they're playing, they're going to try to emulate that. But this is how hockey translates generations. You have a generation, you have a young player like Connor Bedard who's 18 that was 6 and goes, oh, I want to be like Crosby. Now you have young people like your son and sons, oh, I want to be like Connor Bedard, right? It's just magnificent. and again, it speaks to not only how Crosby came in the league and captured the imagination of fans, but of young people. And I think that this is the same thing that Connor Bedard's going to do. And that's what makes it so special, generation to generation to generation. I always say this, as we get a little bit older and we're able to stay young, because the young players coming into the game are really unique, are really gifted and really special. And then we watch the other young people that are fans of the game, players coming up that really look up to these players. It really is something that I sit back and I feel how lucky I am to be able to watch this. We talked about watching Connor. I just feel lucky that I think back and I go, I started watching him when he was 15, when he, and it was the same thing with Sydney. I remember the first time I saw Sydney play, it was at the Max Midget tournament, the U16 now in Calgary, and everybody was talking about Sydney. I remember going and watching, oh, yeah, he's the real deal. And here it is, he's 18 years in the league, and I'm going, okay, geez, do I look that much older?
Yeah, and he's still the real deal.
Yes.
Yeah. The other question I always get is, what makes a good junior hockey team? Because it doesn't necessarily mean, the team's loaded with draft picks, although sometimes that does help. But when you say, that's just a good junior hockey team right there, what does that kind of mean to you?
So I'm going to use the most recent Memorial Cup champions, the Quebec Remparts, as an example here. And, when Patrick came in there to coach, he drafted a lot of those players were young. They were 16, they drafted a lot of those players, and then Patrick understood that at 16, a lot of those young players, were going to need time. And Quebec, he was patient with that process. As watch him. He made some trades. He ends up trading for Zachary Bolduc. He ends up trading for Justin Robidas. Top player. I believe they had 6 or 7 players that won the Memorial Cup. My memory, there was 6 or 7. There were members of the gold medal winning Quebec team at the Canada Games, Malatesta and Bolduc, and you think about a number of the players. It was pretty impressive. Robidas was on that team, Malatesta. Anyway, He knew he had to be patient with the team and grow it and allow them to not only be confident in their abilities. When you draft these players and you get working with them on a daily basis, they're good, but they need to become confident in their abilities and really secure in terms of okay, I'm part of a team. This is how I'm going to carry myself. The year before, in the 21-22 season, I remember watching Quebec in the spring. I go, this is a really, really good team. And it was and you're watching and I knew a lot of those young players like Malatesta, Robidas, Bolduc. I knew them. I knew them from when they were playing U16. And so you watch them and you're going, geez, this is a really good team. Robidas wasn't there at that time. He got traded, but you knew. And then, they come to the Memorial Cup last year and that was a good team. And I remember Patrick, we were having a discussion, and Patrick said, last year I thought maybe they were a little bit more ready to take that step. And Patrick said we were a good team, but we weren't ready. And he goes, I maybe should have got another player or two, a little bit older player. So I'm going to answer your question here. When the Seattle Thunderbirds lost in the Western Hockey League final the year before to Edmonton, they were good. They were probably like Quebec. And, when they went last year, and it was in November, I remember talking to you, they were looking for 2 defensemen. They ended up getting Luke Prokop back from the Nashville Predators, and they ended up trading for Chad Allen. And, it's the same thing Patrick did. You build your team. You're not going to win with 16 and 17-year-old players. And, you need skill. You need to be patient with that skill. So when I see a good team, I see a team that really understands how to play together. That's hard to do for individual players at this age. To be able to mature, to understand, they're all trying to pursue their own careers. They've been drafted. They're trying to be drafted, So there's an individualistic approach to it. And a good coach, you think about the different coaches that have been really successful. Certainly Patrick comes to mind. But, understanding that, how am I going to help them achieve their individual goals and at the same time help us achieve our team goals. I can see the obvious talents of individual players, but when I see players that really transform, their individual play into a bigger, what I shouldn't say transform, they transform it into more team-oriented concepts. That's when a team really becomes good. I think you have to be older. It takes time. You're coming out of U16. You're a top young player. I see it every year at the Lincoln Gretzky. You got young players and 16-year-old players that have played in the OHL or the Western Hockey League or the Quebec League, and they've been really good. Then they come to the Lincoln Gretzky and they might not play as much. They might not even play. They might get cut, and they've never been cut in their lives. They've all been top players, right? And then they have to understand, and that takes time. So, it goes without saying that you need good goaltending and everything, but I really believe that to be a good, it's taking those players and saying, we're going to help you individually. Now you got to help us as a team, and you got to help us, understand that we're going to be a really good team. And ultimately that's going to help you individually. It's taking them from individual approach to team approach to helping them understand, oh yeah, this will help me individually. And I think the really good coaches do that. And I think coaches need to learn how to do that. Right. And, we see a lot of movement around and teams are making, only one team can win. And here's Patrick who won. And at the same time, he's sitting to himself going, maybe I should have done this last year. It's a learning process all the time, right? You can look at your team, but I really believe that, when you ask me that question, that's the essence of becoming a really good team. When I watched Quebec play and Seattle, excellent team. We saw what Peterborough did. Kamloops well coached, we did. And Seattle was excellent. And I think about the Memorial Cup final game, and Seattle didn't even have a foot in the game, not even a foot in the game. And you're going to yourself, that is an excellent Seattle Thunderbirds team. And it really, I think, spoke to what Patrick did with his group of players to really help them understand, what we can achieve is far greater than any of us can do individually.
I'm glad you picked Quebec, because that's a team that I referenced a lot last year, where I was like, they're just a really good junior team. And I know I have a lot of people that I talk to that watch the NHL, and they'll tune into the Memorial Cup, and then they look at the roster for Seattle and they see it stacked with high-end NHL draft picks and guys that are going to have great NHL careers. And they say, I can't believe that team was beat by Quebec. And I said, well, Quebec is a really good junior hockey team. But that leads me to this year's host of the 104th Memorial Cup presented by Dow. We're heading to Saginaw, Michigan, heading to the States for the first time since 1998. And I just want to find your thoughts, your current thoughts anyway, on what Dave Drinkle and Chris Lazary have going on with the Saginaw Spirit.
1998, the Portland Winterhawks won the Memorial Cup. I was there. We had, Brendan Morrow, who we had drafted in Dallas, was a big part of that Portland Winterhawks team. Marion Hossa got hurt in the semifinal game. I haven't aged all these years, and yet I remember back to '98. I was probably 7 at the time. Anyway, all kidding aside, what's interesting to me, and again, I think that last year, Saginaw, Dave Drinkle and his group, they looked at their team. It was a good team in Saginaw. They had, obviously Michael Misa's there, Zane Parekh, who's going to be a first-round draft pick this year, really dynamic player. We know what he did as a rookie in the OHL. He looked at his team. He said, okay, yeah, we're good enough, but are we good enough to be where we really have a serious shot at winning? And they knew that they were right in the process, right in the throes of the bid for the Memorial Cup, and he traded a top-notch player, Pavel Minchikov. not that he didn't like me, but he just said, "Listen, I can really set up my team for 23-24," and that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of understanding of not only of your team, but also you don't want to, as a manager, as a group, you don't want to kill the spirit of a team. And so what you got, and they're looking, geez, well, why did we trade him? We could maybe win here. And those are some of the tough decisions that a manager and a team or an organization has to make. Dave made it. They made the playoffs. They had success. They won their first round. And I think all of that helped them. And so he recognized that there was something bigger at play here. You know how I just talked about how you have to take the individual has to learn how to become part of a team and it'll help. It's the same thing for a manager. He had to understand that like there was something bigger at play here that I was going to be able to give back not only to the team but to the individuals by going through this. And it's a good team. And he's going to have an opportunity to do some things to strengthen that team again. We saw what Seattle did to strengthen their team. We saw what Kamloops did to strengthen their team. Quebec strengthened their team. Peterborough strengthened. That's what teams do. But David, I think, and his group are in a great position. They have players now that have gone through some really good experience, not only in the OHL playoffs. Zane and Michael, were part of the gold medal winning Hlinka Gretzky team. That's going to help them. But they got good players and they got a good team. And I really believe that, Dave looked at it and he said, yeah, we might have been able to push a little bit further last year, kept Minchukov. But would it have pushed them any further along? Probably not. But at the same time, he understands I'm going to really put my team in position to be successful this year. I think number one, they're going to be a great host. I know they're going to be a great host. And I think as a host team, they could go in there as the champions of the Ontario Hockey League. That's where they're at. And I'm excited about watching the team play. I was excited watching them last year because of Misa and because of Parak. and I'm even more excited to watch them again this year all the way through to the Memorial Cup. And I think they have a real strong chance to be not only a champion in the OHL, but to be a Memorial Cup champion. I think they've set themselves up really, really nicely.
I don't think people really realize how difficult it is to win the Memorial Cup, first of all, but also as a host team to win your league and then also win the Memorial Cup. We haven't had somebody do that since the 2005 London Knights. So what makes you, feel that the Spirit could pull that feat off?
Well, number one, I talk about the age where they're at, and some of the experiences they've gone through. You look at some of and I talk about Michael and I talk about Zane. Zane scores 21 goals as a 16-year-old. I mean, Michael, exceptional status, comes in and was a really good player, and they're only going to be better from those experiences in the OHL. They know what to expect. But Dave has so much experience in the league, and again, like. You're trying to set up your team. You know where you want to be at in terms of your league, and then ultimately Memorial Cup, which is so. I mean, the Memorial Cup might be the hardest trophy to win because not only do you got to go through the grind from, let's say, the beginning of September to May to win your league, then you got to go play, two other league champions and a host team that's been, waiting or a champion in and of itself to try to beat them. I mean, to win that is really, really significant. Now, that being said, and when you go through it and when you watch it, I think that they're mature. I think they have older players. And again, Dave, I think, has the ability to go and add some players to his team that's going to strengthen it, that's going to make it a better team going forward. But it doesn't, you can't do that if you don't have the fundamental players and the fundamental positions covered off. And they do. They have it covered off. And, you look and you think about how you build a team and how you have to be patient. Saginaw has done that. They've been patient. They end up, it's interesting. They drafted Adam Fantilli late in the first round in the OHL. Adam never came, but because he never came, they got a compensatory pick. So that ended up being Zane Parekh. They weren't looking at it that way when they were hopeful to get Adam. But it's turned out to be Zane Parekh, and that type of thinking, and it's not so much necessarily saying, well, we'll end up with this player. It's about putting yourself in position to take advantage of some of the things and decisions you've made previously. And I think they've been measured. I think they've been really shrewd and really smart in how they've moved forward. And I think that really becomes significant if you want to be successful, not only in your respective league, but to get to the Memorial Cup and be a team that can be a serious contender to win.
Yeah, they might have some of the best centers in the OHL with Hunter Haight and Sapovalov and Joey Willis as your top three centers, which allows you to play a guy like Michael Misa on the wing, who's a natural center himself.
Well, again, all the pieces, right? Like everything that you want to be able to do, and like you think about Sapovaloff. I mean, he's going to play in the World Junior again. I mean, he was a good player last year. He's going to be a better player, and so even that stretch when he leaves to go play in the World Junior tournament, that experience is going to help him, and then he's going to come back, right? Hunter Haight is, he was a player that's really smart. He just needed some physical maturity. I'm back to the maturity process, right? So you have Hunter Haight a couple of years ago. He's not ready to really take hold of a game. He is now. And you need players that can take hold of a game if you want to be a championship caliber team at any level. You have to have those players. It doesn't mean that they don't have capability, but they have to have the maturity in so many different areas to take hold of a game and to say, this is how I'm going to grab a hold of it, and this is how I'm going to make my impact. That's where they're at. And I just believe that, when you look at all that, and again, there might be, you mentioned Joey Willis, right? Like Joey Willis is not a household name. Joey Willis is not a name that everybody's going, oh yeah, he's the next great player in the NHL. But he's a player that's going to help that team be successful. And that is incredibly important.
Now, they also this year have a 9-part docuseries, Spirit Uprising, following them, behind the scenes look at the team throughout the year. Episode 1 has already ran, and you can watch that on CHL TV if you so choose. But what does something like that do for the team, for the franchise, getting them aware of the bright lights of cameras being around, especially heading into the Memorial Cup when TSN is going to be there all the time? And what does that kind of do to help put a spotlight on the franchise itself?
I'm going to start with the franchise first. You just mentioned that, it's the first time a U.S. franchise is hosting the Memorial Cup since 1998 when Spokane hosted it. So when you consider that this is a good franchise, they've really been able to build up a following, and they've had success, as a team. That's really important. And recruiting is a big part of junior hockey. And there's a draft, but you have to have the players and their families have to have a sense that this is a good place to go and to be where I can develop, and not just on the ice, but off the ice. So to be able to use that, and I don't want to use it loosely, but as a marketing tool to let everybody, and a recruiting tool, that's incredibly important. It's a well-run organization. Craig does a great job as an owner right at the top, and it permeates all the way through. Then, like the young players, they watch and everything. But now you make a great point. Now you're going to be in the spotlight. Now you're going to be asked and to get comfortable with that, right? Last year, we go back to the Quebec Remparts. They were putting 18,000 people in their building, for the playoffs. And Patrick's been used to the spotlight, so he can work with them and let them understand it. And I think it's really good for the young. I don't think it's just good for the young players for the Memorial Cup. It's tremendous experience for them to go through this. It's also going to help them in everything they do going forward in their lives. Everything, to be comfortable with themselves, expressing themselves. They're going to be asked. Michael Misa is going to have a microphone in front of him for the next 20 years. So this is just part of his kind of training and education in that area. And other players are going to be able to have, the leaders of the team are going to have a chance to talk about the team. And so, when you get players, and I always try to do this when I'm around the U17 tournament, the World Under-17 Challenge, or the Linka Gretzky. The players are young at those points in time. Some of them are 15, most of them are 16, 17 at the Linka Gretzky. I don't want to ask them hard-hitting questions. I want to get them comfortable talking, just like what they're. And I think that this is another example of that with the Memorial Cup and the 9-part docuseries for the Saginaw Spirit. So the Saginaw Spirit players that are going to be able to be comfortable with the spotlight around them, to be in the focal point of the community, and the players are representing the team. You have stakeholders and sponsors that are part of supporting the team. So all of this works together. And when I say it'll help all the players as they move forward, not just into the Memorial Cup, but long after, I think it's just a tremendous experience. It's a tremendous effort to work with the players in the organization to give them that education and that experience.
Well, so we've talked about the host team. We've got some other teams that are in the tops of the CHL top 10 rankings. Maybe we'll touch on a few of those to see who could possibly be joining Saginaw. The very early look at who could possibly be at the 104th Memorial Cup presented by Dow. Let's start out west. And, the top 3 teams out west right now currently, based on the CHL top 10 rankings, would be Portland, Moose Jaw, and Saskatoon, with Portland being at the top right now. Moose Jaw obviously just got Denton Matejchuk back, their captain, and Saskatoon with Lazowski and Sidoroff look like a pretty dangerous team as well. What do you like about those teams, kind of quickly, and then we'll touch on a couple other O teams and Q teams.
I'm just going to say I'm going to keep a sleeper alive out there. The Prince George Cougars. Okay, the Prince George Cougars are a pretty good team, and don't make sure you pay attention to that. But we're going to pay.
We can quickly talk about Prince George, because, like you said, right now they are a juggernaut. They're averaging over six goals a game. They might have, the surprise player or breakout duo of the year in Tarek Parasek and Andre Becker. So why don't we'll start with PG then, because we got those two guys there as well, and the recently drafted Riley Height and Cohen Zemer. So they're a young, exciting team. Is the offense sustainable out there?
Yeah, it is, because Mark Lamb and Jimmy Playfair are coaching that team. And, a couple years ago, Riley Height was a 16-year-old player, and he was a frontline center. Cohen Zemer was young. He had the late birthday, so he had to wait a year for his draft year. But Mark told me, he goes, you know what? These guys, these younger players are really good. We're going to give them every opportunity. There's going to be some growing pains here. It's interesting because we're back to the whole maturing process, which is, and there's so much evidence of it, right? And that's why I'm confident when I say that. But now you're looking at a team. Riley Height's 18. Cohen Zemer's 18. Zach Funk, he's come over. He's terrific. You talk about Parasek. I mean, I watched Parasek play at the edge. I watched him. I go, yeah, he's got some skill. I knew where he'd been drafted. Just taking around Becker, Kimmich on the blue line. I mean, this is a team that goes after it. Keep in mind that Mark Lamb was part of those great Edmonton Oilers teams that were offensive juggernauts. So Mark Lamb is somebody that's going to embrace an offensive juggernaut. Sometimes what you have to do too, we ask, is it sustainable? 6 goals a game isn't sustainable. I think we know that. But at the same time, Mark will wait for the opportune time to say, okay, we got to go and try to win this way. But the maturing process is Riley Height now, 2 years under his belt, understanding, okay, I can do more than just score, and I can help them. I'm drafted. I don't have to worry about that. Becker, all those players can just go and play. And I think that becomes really important. But they are a juggernaut. And, but again, Mark told me that 2 years ago when Riley was 16. And so now here we are 2 years later, and they're much, much better. Portland is always going to have a good team. Mike Johnson does a great job in Portland. They have good players. They're patient with their process. They let young players play as much as they're capable of playing and showing. But then they get to a point where they go, okay, and Portland right now might be a perfect example of a team that might not have all these, high-end prospects, but what they have is this ability. Did you see that?
I did.
I have no idea what that
was. Some balloons.
Honestly, I didn't do anything. I just went like this. So I don't know.
That was good.
There's magic in these fingers. Yeah. I don't, not in tablet anyway. You can do with that with what you wish. But they might not have household NHL prospects, but they're a good team. They're a really good team, and Mike does such a great job. Saskatoon, you consider what they've done and how they've been patient last year. I mean, Connor Bedard gave them a run for their money. Colin Priestner said to me, he goes, "Can you imagine us? We win 40 plus games, and our reward is we get Regina, and we got to try to find." It goes to Game 7 before Saskatoon find, but they're ready. They're ready to take that next step. They're ready again. You think about Tanner Molendijk, a first-round draft pick. They got a really good team there. They got players that are hungry and hard, and again, just look at the ages. Just go look at the ages of these teams. Down the Moose Jaw. That Medachuk, he controls the game. The Furcus Circus or Furc de Soleil, if you want to use it in bilingual terms. Jagger, I love Jagger. I love the way Jagger plays. I think he's such a fantastic player. And again, Alan Miller, who is now in Regina, he drafted all those players when he was with Moose Jaw. And again, you're drafting them at 14, 15, and here they are. Here they are all now at that age, 19 years of age. And yeah, Matejchuk, he'll be on the World Junior team. I think Jagger Furcus has a great chance to be on the World Junior team. You're looking at players. Let's not forget about Braden Yeager. The Pittsburgh's first round. These are all like players that are difference makers in the game, and they're not the only players. They got lots of good players around them, and when we talk about that maturing process, and what I would say is, yeah, Prince George has some really top quality high end players, but Moose Jaw might have, when we talk about NHL pedigrees, for prospects, Moose Jaw might have the most of anybody, and they're a well balanced, well rounded team.
PG kind of reminds me of the Winnipeg Ice from the last couple of seasons, a really high octane team. Let's turn our attention to the Quebec League. Rouyn-Noranda started off the year as our top ranked team. They've kind of struggled to score out of the gate. They've only dropped one game in regulation as of right now, but they're losing in extra time. And then you've got Halifax still waiting on Jordan Dumais to come back there, but what do you like from both of those teams? You also have Bay Como, who's been off to a hot start, and Drummondville, which should be a strong team this year as well.
Yeah, well, Drummond. So let's look at. It's interesting. I'll put Bay Como aside for right now. They're a team that's trying to push themselves up into that category of take us seriously, and they're working at it and trying to find their way. And you want to see some teams maybe out of the mainstream have an opportunity to push themselves into the what I would call into the stage of recognition. And that's where Bay Como's at. Rouyn-Noranda's won. We know what Halifax has done. Drummondville has a great reputation. Rouyn, obviously they got some players over from the Quebec Remparts, including the goaltender, which isn't going to hurt you, right? So, they got a lot. They might not be scoring like in overtime right now. They will. I don't think there's any question that they're going to be a team that's going to find its way, and they have all the elements. And when you have a goaltender such as they do with that winning pedigree, Rousseau just gives you a sense. I got it. Don't worry. Take as long as you need to score. They don't need to score in October to win. Well, you do need to score in October to win, but ultimately this team is too good. They will end up finding their way. Halifax, Cam Russell. Cam Russell to me has done for years what I just talked about Dave Drinkle doing and Saginaw doing with the Spirit. Recognizing when it's time and recognizing when it isn't. And he was patient with some of the young players, Jordan Dumais amongst them, and now they're ready to push. They're ready to be a serious contender. You think about last year. They had a great series versus the Quebec Remparts. It looked like maybe they could turn the tables, but Quebec was that strong, but I think that's going to serve Halifax really, really well. Halifax is ready to win. They are ready to win, and Cam is he's got his finger on the pulse. His coach last year, Sylvain Favreau, happens to be in Drummondville now. And we saw the moves that Drummondville made, acquiring, they have some really good players there. And players, again, that can drive play, older players on the blue line. They got that size and that length on the blue line that make it really hard to play against. And I think Sylvain, having gone through the experiences of Halifax and losing last year to Quebec, I think he understands fully and completely what the challenges are of trying to get your team to a certain point. And I think he's got a team that can do it. I think it's, last year, I don't know when it was. It might have been February when I looked, and it was pretty clear to me who the best four teams in the league were, and they were the four teams that ended up playing in the conference final. I'm not so sure that we're not going to get to that point sometime in February again, because I do believe that those teams, and I have no doubts about Rouen. Yeah, you want to see it, right? But certainly Halifax and certainly Drummondville have what it takes to be one of those Final Four teams. I know it's early, but I think we'll get to that point where there'll be a real separation amongst the top 4 or 5 teams in the rest of the league.
And we didn't even talk about Victoriaville, which might have the best 1-2 punch in net in CHL goaltender of the year, Nathan Darveau and Gabriel Dagg. So there's another team you got to always keep an eye out for.
And when I look at Darveau and Dagg, Dagg is such a promising young goaltender. Darveau, the reigning goaltender of the year in the CHL. They're the type of team that if you don't want to play them in the playoffs, because they're the type of team that can flat out beat you because they frustrate you because you can't score on them because the goaltending is so good, and then they find a way to get the right goal at the right time. And certainly when you start to push along those lines, I think it becomes a team to be leery of.
Well, we'll shift back to the OHL now. We obviously already talked about Saginaw. We've got one of the top-ranked teams in the CHL, in the London Knights, who they just always seem to be there. Soo Greyhounds are going to be playing with a chip on their shoulder after not being awarded the right to host the Memorial Cup this year. And then and all three of those teams are obviously in the Western Conference. You look in the Eastern Conference, see what Adam Dennis has been doing, building in North Bay over the last few years. And the Sudbury Wolves, are they ready to take that step there as well?
Well, let's start with London. It should come as no surprise that Mark and Dale Hunter have the London Knights. I mean, they lost in the OHL final last year. It was, unfortunately, their goaltender ended up getting hurt. And I'm not going to suggest that the outcome would have been different, but, certainly that gave a leg up to the Peterborough Petes and give them full marks. They took full advantage of that. But London is so good. I mean, I think about Sam Dickinson. And he was a 16-year-old defenseman last year, playing 20-plus minutes in the playoffs. He had 0 penalty minutes in the playoffs. If that doesn't scream efficiency, Oliver Bonk, a first-round draft pick, they get Casper Halton, and that high-end skill that they've been able to add into Easton Cowan is going to be a frontline player for them. So, when I look at the London Knights, they just made the trade to get a goaltender now, that experience, right? When I look at the London Knights, they're going to be a tough out. I don't care who they're playing, they're going to be a tough out. And certainly we talked about Saginaw. Saginaw is going to have to, they're going to have to go through London. I should say Saginaw or Sault Ste. Marie are going to have to go through London, right? And, and ultimately that sets up great competition. Stu, you talk about the chip on their shoulder. I think Kyle Raftis does such a phenomenal job up there. You think about John Dean coaching and everything. I mean, he's going to coach one of the U17 teams. I think it's great for him to have that experience. They're well coached. They're older, and again, you talk about they just quietly go about their business. They just. Yeah, we're up here in the Soo. You might not be paying attention to us, but we're going to be there, and I think I think they're legitimate. I really do think they're legitimate. Sudbury's really interesting. Because again, you think about William Villeneuve, who was 16 last year. He's 17. Quentin Musty's a little bit older. I almost see Sudbury maybe as where Quebec was in the 21-22 season. What are they going to be able to do in terms of try to add to their team? And it's pretty competitive, with respect to what they're up against. But last year in the playoffs, I'm going through those experiences. But Rob might have to make the same decisions that Dave Drinkle made. Are we better served to look at our team for next year as opposed, and there's turnover, and we know that players might be turning pro, you might be losing players, so it's a balancing act. North Bay, I'd watch out. North Bay has a chip on their shoulder too, because they're not happy about being up 3-2 in their series last year versus Peterborough and then losing games 6 and 7, because it was a good team last year. and they're a good team this year, and they're a hard team. They're a competitive team, much like Peterbilt was last year. Hard to play against, hard to get an upper hand against. Everybody's committed together. Everybody plays together, and I think that that's only going to build over the course of the season. And when you consider that they did lose last year, that's something that's fresh in their minds and something they want to try to make a significant change to. Those are really good. But with Ottawa 67s, I didn't think the Ottawa 67s could be beat last year. I really thought that they were set up to be in the Memorial Cup, win the Ontario Hockey League. That's the beauty of junior hockey, and teams are closer than sometimes we think they are. and as you proceed through the playoffs, that's where you see. And again, I'll finish with this. That's where it becomes really essential and difficult at the same time, where managers have to look at their team and go, "Are we ready? Okay, what do we need to be a little more ready? And maybe this year isn't our year to be ready." And those aren't easy. Fans want their team to go for it all the time. And trust me, players want it, managers want it, coaches want it. But to be able to balance that out becomes a real skill in terms of assessing it and then following through with your convictions.
Well, I know we don't have much time left, but I wanted to quickly touch on the under-17s because I know that's one of your favorite events to go to and follow along with. Going from 3 Canadian teams this year down to 2 teams, do you like that for the competitiveness for Team Canada?
Well, it'll be more competitive. I mein, when you have 3 teams, one of the big things with Hockey Canada is, when they went from 5 teams when it was regional to the 3 Canadian teams, really trying to help the development process, right? So, you start to look at where they're at with respect to 66 players going as opposed to 44. And your talent pool, right, is, you're getting to the higher part of the talent pool with 2 teams instead of spreading it over 3. So that is absolutely going to make the 2 Canadian teams more competitive. There's no question about it. But it's a great tournament for the young players to partake in. And what I love about it the most, the tournament used to take place over Christmas. And you have all that time, October, November, December, where the young players, the 16-year-old players, they're trying to find their way. The coaches, are looking at them and they're going, "Okay, yeah, we know you're a first-round pick or a second-round pick. We know you have problem, but you're not ready." They get the opportunity now to come to the OHL, the Western Hockey League, and the Quebec League and play. They get a taste of it. Then they get to go back to this tournament, an international tournament. They get to measure themselves against the other players across the country and around the world, and they get into their age group, and they can really take what they've learned and push it into their own age group level competition. And then they come back, and I think they come back more ready, more assured of themselves, more confident in their abilities to play. So I love the fact that it's in November. And since they've gone to this format, and I really see a benefit for everybody involved with the 16-year-old. We know they're good players coming out of U16, but it's hard. It's a hard jump to the CHL. And I think that where this tournament is positioned really helps those players get a better understanding and a better footing and ability to help their respective teams when they come back from the U17. Again, just for me, I love it. You're right. It's a phenomenal tournament to watch, and it becomes a real significant opportunity to identify the next generation of players that are coming up. And I get fortunate. I get to watch some U16 in the West. I get to see some U17 midget Trois in Quebec, and certainly the OHL with their U16 program. But to see all those players, playing against one another, it really is. It's exciting. It's an exciting time to because you're not going in there to evaluate. You're going in there to observe and go, "Wow, look at that! Look at him! Look at him!" It's really special. And here we are. We're coming up to the NHL draft in June of 2024. And I'll be referencing back to November of 2022 when I started to see a lot of these players for the first time.
Well, one of those players, most likely the roster hasn't been announced yet, would be Medicine Hat Tiger Gavin McKenna, who doesn't turn 16 until December 20th. And he's already leading his team in scoring, put up some big numbers last year as an underager. To say that he can break out even more after this, it's just a scary proposition.
Well, it's scary, but it's accurate. I mean, and you know what's great about this, and as we finish, and I think we should finish it. We started with Bedard, and Gavin McKenna is Bedard's cousin. So we'll bookend this with bloodlines. So we're talking about Connor Bedard at the beginning now. Gavin McKenna is a tremendous player. He is so talented and so driven, and he's not eligible until the 2026 NHL draft because he's got a December birthday. So when you watch him play at this age, again, I'm gonna encourage everybody in the Western Hockey League. You know what? It's going to cost you a lot more money once he turns pro than to watch him play. Get out, buy a ticket, and go watch Gavin McKenna. He's worth the price of admission. He obliterated the Canada Games last year. In terms of scoring and presence and everything. Excellent player for Medicine Hat. He started out the year fantastic. He's going to be on the team. In fact, I would suggest that he will be a frontline player and maybe the marquee player there for Canada. There's other players from around the world that are coming there, but for Canada, I think he'll be the marquee player, and he's the real deal. The skill and the drive and the understanding of how to utilize his fantastic abilities to make a real impact and dent into the game. At 15 years of age, I'm massively impressed. When I had to go down last year and just see him because he played in Kelowna, and Byron Ritchie, his son Ryder's playing in Prince Albert, a top prospect for this coming year's draft. Jerome McGinley's at the same thing, and to hear them talk about Gavin McKenna before I even saw, I was like, okay, yeah, I think those two gentlemen have some real. Gravitas when it comes to talking about good hockey players, and Gavin is a tremendous, like he really is, and I don't want to try to make him out to be bigger than he is, but he's big.
Awesome, Craig, this has been amazing as always. Thanks for taking the time with me today. Let's do it again soon.
It's always my pleasure to do it with you. It's always a pleasure, and I get a great thrill talking about the young players. It's the future of hockey. And the future of hockey is bright. So thank you.
I'll have to get Craig back soon because we didn't get to half the stuff I wanted to talk about. Either way, make sure you check back next week where I'll have special guests from the CHL Top 10 ranking teams. Hint, one's from the WHL and the other, the QMJHL. Until next time.